Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this first in a series of conversations aimed at building inclusive economic competitiveness in Indiana communities. As we build from the economic fallout of the corona pandemic, emerging real estate and business entrepreneurs will play a critical role. Entrepreneurs can inject creativity, diversity, expertise, and energy into our communities, accelerating recovery and restructuring local economies with greater resilience and parity so we can collectively weather future economic shocks and waves. My name is Keith Brodnix, Senior Vice President of Business Development for Sanair. We are an affordable housing investor and lender. I've been with the company for 19 years and was one of our underwriters prior to my current role. To provide emerging entrepreneurs a lifeline, the Biden-Harris administration championed an exclusive window for small businesses to access the Paycheck Protection Program in February and March. Nevertheless, the program could assist just a fraction of Black-owned firms. Ron Busby, President and CEO of U.S. Black Chambers, Inc., shared in a March 13th interview with CBS News that 2.5 million of the 2.6 million Black-owned firms in the United States do not have employees who could benefit from PPP. Support for emerging entrepreneurs requires a different approach, and business models will continue to evolve post-pandemic. ClickBank, an online retailer and marketplace, reported an 88.1% increase in account registrations during April 2020, when unemployment reached 14.7%. The data ClickBank report suggests a trend towards commercialization of side gigs in a way that could present significant opportunity to add long-term resilience and opportunity parity to local economies. And as the economy goes, so goes the place. Business development and community development are interdependent and complementary phenomena. During this sustained period of economic turmoil, Indiana has experienced a dramatic reshaping of the residential real estate market. According to the U.S. Census estimates released March 9th, rental vacancy in Indiana has exploded 39% over the past year, a dramatic contrast to regional trends. Homeownership vacancy trended in parallel with other states in the regions, but at a faster rate, declining by half from 2019 to 2020. The sparse availability of housing for homeownership is driving values to record levels. This brings us to our conversation today. It is not uncommon for people to bounce ideas and real estate development concepts off me, and there is often a lot of potential in those concepts. This series is designed to help you and your organizations transform those ideals into income-generating ventures. Our goal today is to provide an overview of the landscape of partners and resources in Indiana that can be valuable in helping you and your organization take a business or real estate opportunity and turn it into a wealth-building activity. In future conversations, we will dive deep into the partners and resources available to support emerging entrepreneurs in Indiana, but today is an introduction. And with that, I will introduce our panelists. We will start off first with David Watkins, State Director of the Indiana Small Business Development Center. David?
Hello, thank you, Keith. I'm glad to be here and glad to have this conversation. As Keith mentioned, I'm David Watkins. I'm the State Director of Small Business Development at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. In that role, I oversee what's known as the Indiana SBDC, which is an acronym for the Indiana Small Business Development Center. And it is the state's boots on the ground for assisting small businesses and entrepreneurs in all geographic regions of the state. Every Hoosier entrepreneur, small business has access to our resources. You may or may not know 99.4% of the businesses in the state of Indiana qualify as small businesses, according to the federal government's definition, represent about half of our employment as a state. So small businesses are really the backbone of many communities, especially in rural Indiana. We have 10 offices spread around the state. and most of our offices are hosted locally by universities. For example, in Indianapolis, our office is part of the Butler University Lacey School of Business. Every one of our offices has a director and support staff and a number of different business advisors and counselors who help small businesses and entrepreneurs every single day with everything from starting a business to selling a business to getting product overseas to registering, financing, market research. Last year alone, we met with over 5,400 businesses. And what I like to say is there were 5,400 unique issues that every single one of those businesses had. We also commonly are here to help businesses navigate federal and state landscape and bureaucracy and programs. We're kind of the one-stop shop expertise. So if a small business is having a concern with a state government agency or with the federal government, if they're curious about what programs are available for them or their business or their business idea, the SBDC serves as a guide and referral source for many of the organizations that are on this panel. We also help entrepreneurs access a lot of the relief funding that has rolled out from the federal and state level over the last year. Things like PPP, economic injury disaster loans, upcoming shuttered venues, restaurant revitalization fund, restart grant, and many, many more, many names, many different programs. And so I'm excited to be on this panel and talk about how the SBDC can help you start your business.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Jennifer Milliken, Senior Director with the Urban Land Institute.
Hi, thank you, Keith. Yes, as you said, I'm this top staff person for ULI in Indiana. ULI is a 501c3 professional and membership association with a mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact worldwide. Locally, we support that mission through programs designed to connect, inspire, and lead. Among these is a real estate diversity initiative designed to accelerate careers in real estate development for people of color and women. And we believe that equitable neighborhoods start with equitable development teams, and that's a lot of what we're focused on right now. Thank you.
Sorry. Next, we have Adam Huxma, Executive Director of Bankable.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, so Adam Huxma, like he said, I'm the Executive Director at Bankable. We are a nonprofit based out of Anderson, but we serve the state of Indiana as a micro lender. Primarily, we help provide loans, business loans, to any for-profit Indiana small business that's not yet bankable, so not yet able to get a loan at a traditional bank. We lend from as little as $500 up to $250,000, and yeah, I've been in this role for a little over 10 years now, and yeah, just really enjoy working with entrepreneurs and helping try to find ways to fund and grow their business. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And our last presenter, Aaron Larimore, Senior Program Officer, LISC Indianapolis.
Might help if I unmute. Yeah, this is the age of Zoom. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Aaron Larimore, Senior Program Officer with the Local Initiative Support Corporation office here in Indianapolis. LISC is a national financial intermediary organization supporting redevelopment and revitalization in distressed communities all across the country. We've had a presence here in Indianapolis for almost 30 years. We work with a number of neighborhoods and organizations here in Indianapolis with a variety of activities that cut across the community development landscape in physical redevelopment, economic development, workforce development, health, social determinants of health, a wide variety of initiatives. We are have a significant amount of activity around small business development and support in the neighborhoods that we are working with. We convene a collaborative of CDFIs here in Indianapolis. Adam is a part of that work along with several others. We are working to deploy COVID relief to small businesses. We've done a significant amount of that with support from Verizon nationally, organizations like Cummins, more recently here in Indianapolis, deploying relief grants to small businesses and providing a variety of supports to business support organizations here in the city that are supporting and working within the ecosystem that helps small businesses to grow and to thrive. So we're delighted to be here with you today to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Aaron. With that, we will dive into our questions. And the first question is going to be for David. So David, what are the most important factors someone should consider when preparing to start a venture in business or real estate?
Yes, it's a great question. And, I think regardless of whether the business model that you're pursuing is around real estate investment or development or really just any type of service or product business, you really have to start personally with an assessment of your entrepreneurial goals. If you want to be an entrepreneur, why? Are there situational, environmental context that you're looking for a new gig, you're looking for the next gig, you were potentially economically laid off or impacted in the current coronavirus situation and the pandemic. Are you looking for greater pay? Are you looking for greater wealth? Are you looking to acquire assets? These are all really good things because we find with a lot of people, and I'm sure others do, that there can be at times a glamorization of entrepreneurship, and while it can be very, very glamorous, and if you've met passionate entrepreneurs, you know that they are really wonderful members of our communities. They would be the first to tell you that it's not always an easy path. It's a challenging path. If valuing a 9-to-5 is important to you, then understanding that entrepreneurship doesn't have any hours, small business ownership doesn't have any hours. If you have to sign your name to the front of a paycheck that's supporting someone else's life, their well-being, their family, their house, their food, that is an immense responsibility. And so when folks interact with the Small Business Development Center, we often start with an assessment of themselves. Is entrepreneurship right for me? What areas of entrepreneurship might I be surprised about? Might I not be ready for? And I think that's important before you start any new endeavor to kind of understand what are my goals and why do I want to do it. Once you get past that, you really start to dive into what it is that you want to do. Is it solving a problem? Is it accumulating wealth? Is it real estate investment? How do you want to do it, right? And so these start to become the parts of a rudimentary basic business plan. And I'm a firm believer that every business should have a business plan, right? If you're going to be organized for profit as a business, you need to have a plan for how that business is going to operate, what you're going to do. And I think in many ways, it's about strategically keeping yourself almost ruthlessly focused on what it is that you want to do. What market do you want to operate in? What kind of assets do you want to accumulate? What kind of properties, if it's real estate, do you want to go after, right? And understanding that nobody, and certainly a business, cannot be all things for all people, right? And having that ability to get it down on paper. Business plans are living documents, right? They don't stay statically. What you put down in that business plan in the very beginning is something that develops over time as you develop as an entrepreneur. Beyond that, I think that some of the really important factors in any field, but especially in real estate, knowing your market is really, really important. That's whether you're making a widget or you're providing a service or you're investing in real estate or developing real estate. I hesitate to say you need to know it better than anyone else, but you need to be in that top echelon for whatever type of business it is. You need to have knowledge that 95% of the rest of people don't have. You need to have a level of understanding of what that market is. If it's light real estate, if it's light industrial real estate, or if it's residential, or if it's commercial, or if you're starting you're producing widgets, or you're offering some type of new service that solves a problem for people. You really need to know your market, and there are lots of different ways for entrepreneurs to learn more about their market. Certainly there's primary market research, talking to people, asking them about their own business, networking. Here in Indianapolis, we've got the Real Estate Investors Association. We have secondary market research databases. We use a lot of those in the SBDC. Many of them are geographic information systems. So they pull a lot of geographic, demographic, psychographic data about different markets, different neighborhoods, different street corners. There's a lot of data out there for you to consume. It's really important for you to know your market really well, so that you can make the best, most educated decisions on where to invest, where to develop, and what kind of offerings to have for your business. And then beyond that, financing. And I know we've got a couple folks here on the panel that will hit on it. But real estate can be a capital intensive endeavor. And so understanding the financing landscape, the options out there, Bankable, SBA micro lenders, CDFIs have all been mentioned already. Depending on the size of the deals, there are options that go into traditional lending, and even CDC and 504 lending, and all sorts of financing options. But really, find a place to start, understand what the capital needs are, and know your market really, really well.
Thank you, David. Next question is for Aaron. Aaron, how can communities be helpful to people or organizations considering a business or real estate opportunity?
So there are a variety of ways that communities can be helpful to folks looking at real estate business opportunities. For communities, and by communities thinking about both municipalities and then different organizations within a community, providing or making available, having available different sources of research and information that help people address or size up markets, figure out, see opportunities. You think of basic level resources for research like MapIndy, for example, which is a website that provides property information, parcel information for parcels in the city of Indianapolis. So that's an important basic tool that lets a real estate entrepreneur identify a site, find out ownership, size, a whole variety of sort of technical information that you would need as you were beginning an endeavor like that. So that's one part of it is sort of that informational overview and structure. Networks, groups and organizations like the Indianapolis Chamber or the Indianapolis Black Chamber, for example, are important linkages and networks for businesses and entrepreneurs to connect with resources and with other entrepreneurs and opportunities. We have a whole segment of support organizations in Indianapolis that are also part of that information infrastructure and set of networks out there that can help people as they are looking for an opportunity. I think one of the other big major pieces is access to capital, and an opportunity, different ways, opportunities and sources of capital for entrepreneurs at all the different stages of business formation. Whether that's sort of businesses who are it's an idea but it's pre-revenue, businesses that have a plan and maybe have begun to do some level of operation, maybe businesses who are who employ a person other than the business owner themselves, and businesses making that leap or that movement to growth to bring on new employees and staff up. So capital, a continuum of capital across all those different kinds of stages of business formation is another part of the set of tools for a community to make available to entrepreneurs and business owners.
Okay, and I'm going to jump in here as we start to get the questions. One of the questions that we recently received is, how can young people, high schoolers, get involved in exploring entrepreneurship opportunities and that lead to early initiatives that lead to social and economic inclusion? Is there capital opportunities for young entrepreneurs?
I can jump in on a program that we have at ULI called Urban Plan, which has several different uses, but one of those uses is to introduce young people to careers in real estate and development. We have not offered it to high schoolers here in Indiana yet, but that is on our radar to begin probably this summer in a partnership with Ball State University. So if that's something that you'd like to learn more about, I'm happy to connect with you on.
I'd also mention, just real quick, we were actually discussing this as panelists before the start of the event, but the Innovate Within pitch competition is sponsored by the state every year. And we've just now getting ready for the regional finals for each of the regions of the state, where high school teams from across the state will be competing in a series of regional pitch competitions at later this month in April. And then there will be a state finals at the end of the summer, where 10 teams will pitch to a panel. And there's definitely some serious capital on the line in terms of scholarship opportunities for the students, but also opportunities for their businesses. And I would say that exploring what that local ecosystem looks like for you could also include what pitch competitions are going on in your areas. Another initiative that I know is starting to really take root is the Ivy Tech Rise initiative. Which again is part of an educational curriculum around entrepreneurship, but that involves student teams at Ivy Tech starting businesses, and the organization that facilitates that for Ivy Tech does reserve capital for helping those businesses get started as well.
Thank you. So our next question goes to Jennifer. Jennifer, the ideal of getting into real estate development seems complex. How can people prepare to pursue a career in real estate development?
Well, you're right. It seems complex because it is complex. But the thing that's great about it, a lot of people, real estate's open to people from a lot of different backgrounds educationally. And I think that's one thing that's appealing about it to people. In other words, not a lot of people go to school to get a degree in real estate, right? They have backgrounds in other things. And then they find that they usually need to supplement that with some other education, which can be more formal or more informal. On the formal side, as I mentioned before, locally, we have a program called the Real Estate Diversity Initiative. And that is a 15-week course designed for people of color and women to help them accelerate their careers in the industry. It's open to people who have a minimum of 2 years of experience in some related discipline to real estate. But we have people all the way up to mid-year professionals or mid-career professionals, excuse me. And even people that are maybe at the twilight of one aspect of their career and are considering a shift. So that's real interesting. So we take them through that 15-week class that follows the development process, and they learn more about those steps. And since they have some experience, most of them are really adept already at some of the steps, and it's just rounding out their education on the whole development process. Also on the formal education side, ULI has online courses available through ULI Learning that you can sign up for and take on your own time. And then there's the, the informal education that happens through connections with others. One reason we're a professional membership association is, members are there to help each other. And if you're a member, you should feel free to contact any other member and, pick their brain about what you're working on. And we find that's especially likely to happen in our smaller affinity groups. Like we have a young leaders group of people under 35 or a women's leadership group, and they really want to help one another. We also emphasize the importance of connections in that READY class. We deliver that class through dozens of local volunteers who we've picked specifically so that the people in the class can meet existing professionals in the industry. And we share all their contact info and so they leave with dozens of connections that they can go to with their questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. And you've been asked to put some of that information into the chat room. So next question is for Adam. Adam, we've heard a lot about the need to access financing. Can you provide an overview of the financing landscape in Indiana?
Yeah, sure. So, I like to always start as you're thinking about financing your business, the first place to kind of think about is personal, your personal savings. If you have, if you can scrape together some savings and start really small, I always think that's the best way to do it if you could, because when you're using your own money, you're in control. You don't have to answer our pesky questions as a lender that we're going to keep bugging you about or do any reporting to us. And same thing from a investor perspective. So if you can, and even just getting started with your personal funds is kind of, I'd say, a great way to do it, at least to start. Kind of the next maybe phase on the list there would be friends and family. One thing that I do like to mention that we end up seeing a lot, just to keep in mind as you're partnering with or borrowing or taking on investment from friends and family. One, you're going to be hopefully friends or you're going to be family with them, whether the business works out or not. So, you just think about that carefully as you go into any sort of lending or investment relationship or business partnership with friends or family. And then another thing, just a little tip that folks run into, there's kind of this magic number of 20% ownership. If you're partnering with really anybody that wants to take on more of a passive role in the business, if you make sure that they have 20% or less, or I should say less than 20% ownership, that will that may end up helping you later when you get to people like us talking about business loans, because the SBA is going to require any owner that has 20% or more ownership to personally guarantee. So, if you go to Aunt Julie and say, hey, will you invest in the business? I'll give you 20%. Aunt Julie might be willing to do that. But then when you come back and say, hey, we need a business loan to grow, the lender is going to say, well, Aunt Julie is a 20% owner. She's got to personally guarantee this loan. That may be more than she was really willing to sign up for. And so then you've got some trickiness there. So just that's something to keep in mind from the forefront. Grants, I'll just say real quick on grants, they're kind of an unreliable source of funding. Has actually been, especially with COVID, lots of different grant opportunities. But I'd say there's very rarely this like consistent source of grants that you can really rely on, that I could point to and say, there's always going to be a grant here. So that's a little tougher and hit or miss. Then you kind of get to folks like Bankable, business lenders. We like to call ourselves mission lenders, that we're lending with a mission motive, not a profit motive. And so there are a handful of SBA microlenders and CDFIs that can lend to small businesses throughout Indiana. And we focus on those businesses that aren't bankable yet. And then kind of finally at the top of the heap, I guess, would be banks. And I always say, if you can get a loan from a bank, you should do that. They are going to be more flexible than us, and they're going to be cheaper than us. And we're trying to fill a gap, early in the stage of your business, where the bank's just not quite ready. Typically, a bank might like to see a couple of years in business. They want to see a trend. They want to see a couple of years of progress and some stability. Not always, but oftentimes that's true. And so that's kind of where after a couple of years, you might get to that bankable standpoint. So that's kind of the overview of the financing in Indiana.
Okay, thank you. And we had another question come in, and the question is, when building a more equitable ecosystem for innovation, how do you go about ensuring everyone has an equal seat at the table for funding products, etc.? Also, how do your groups expose African Americans to entrepreneurship opportunities and careers?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll dive in with a couple of thoughts on that. I think in terms of building a more equitable system of access to capital, what LISC is looking at and thinking about are what are the characteristics of Black and brown businesses in Indianapolis, for example. If you look at many of the demographics around business owners in Indianapolis, Black and brown business owners, many of them are women. Many, something like 70–80% of them are sole proprietors. So part of making capital more accessible is understanding what the demographics of that business community, that small business community, that entrepreneurship community looks like, and trying to build some system around how do you serve those folks. And then you have other issues that I think are relevant for Black and brown businesses as they try to form or to grow. If they're Black and brown businesses, one of the realities is that those businesses are emerging. Those entrepreneurs are emerging from a community that is often unbanked. So that unbanked nature of the community, of a significant segment of the community, transfers to entrepreneurs who come out of that community, but have not had significant relationships with banks. Other challenges for Black and brown businesses, when you recognize that significant numbers of them are women, you have issues like lack of childcare become a factor as those entrepreneurs are trying to access resources, trying to grow. Other challenges that those entrepreneurs in Black and brown communities are facing, just a lack of informational resources, a lack of technical assistance around organizing their businesses, things like accounting, legal, taxes, marketing. So those are challenges too. And then, the basic challenge of access to capital, and in particular, access to startup equity. That's a significant area where there's not, where there's really a lack in terms of the resources available to Black and brown businesses. Working capital or credit is also very challenging often. So businesses that have gotten somewhat established and now they're trying to grow, trying to be able to hire that first employee or that next employee, or trying to expand the customers and the scale of contracts and work that they're doing. And then they start running up against problems like, I land a big contract, but I have to be able to cash flow it, and I don't really have the resources to do it. And then, when for companies, entrepreneurs who are, maybe they're doing well, and now they're really trying to expand, they're trying to grow, and they need capital that helps them, get that piece of machinery. Maybe I run a printing business, and to really expand what I can do, I need a higher level, higher volume type of printer. It's a major capital acquisition to help my business grow, and I need capital for that. So these are the different kinds of challenges that Black and brown businesses are facing, and what we have to do is to try to build infrastructure that helps support businesses, meet them where they're at, and that address challenges in the system. It's not necessarily in the small business context, but for example, when you think about developing businesses in Black and brown communities, and you're going to underwrite those, and you use appraisals in your underwriting as part of how you assess valuation and so forth. Well, that you can do that, but there is a bit of a problem there, because appraisals are based on comps and a variety of other factors in neighborhoods that have experienced long periods of redlining, of discrimination or bias in the way that they were handled within the real estate market, and that's sort of some of that history and stuff shows up in appraisals and appraisal values. So when you use that in your underwriting, you're incorporating some of those kinds of bias issues along with it. So, for example, there's a lot of examination among CDFIs like LISC and others to think through how we're underwriting projects, what kinds of information we use in order to do that, and identifying the extent to which there may be bias, elements of bias that seep into it because of these larger structural issues.
Does anyone else have anything else to add? Yeah, I see that Jennifer posted additional information in the chat room. We will move on to our next question. And our next question is for Aaron. Aaron, what are the most common reasons a real estate project succeeds or fails?
A lot of projects, succeed. Failure. There are lots of different fail points for real estate projects. Some of the most common ones are just failure to understand the costs associated with a particular development project. So, not really having taken into account all of the different factors that are going to impact the cost of a project. Underestimating, issues like insurance or the cost of environmental cleanup, or you get basic things like paying too much for a particular parcel or site, and that cost can't really be supported by the development as you move forward, and that's a very fairly common mistake that you can see, where people just pay too much for the development, and they didn't really think through whether or not their project could support that. So those are some common issues in terms of failure. Successful projects do a good job of figuring out what their costs are, try to match up financing resources that are really appropriate for the type of project that they're doing, and you try to have efficiency. So you try to move through and get yourself to the closing table in an efficient manner. Make sure that you take into account the various factors that you need. Good planning, good financial projections, and a good understanding of what you're trying to accomplish with any particular real estate project are all key pieces to being successful and not having your project waylaid by changes in the market or unforeseen costs.
Thanks, Aaron. Next question is for Jennifer. Jennifer, when joining the Urban Land Institute's cohort, what are the most common misconceptions about real estate development?
I'm not sure if this is a misconception or not, but I was thinking back to what David said at the beginning about knowing your goals. And I think it's also important for the potential real estate entrepreneur to know their goals. It's kind of a continuum. I mean, from, you know, a starting point maybe of just flipping a single house to flipping many houses. And then there's those who are in real estate investment, and it's more about the ROI for them, and those are fine too. Where ULI's sweet spot is because I mentioned our mission is shaping the built environment. So I think our sweet spot is people who are looking to impact more than just, you know, what's on this piece of property, but also want to impact a neighborhood and, you know, an industry and what's going on in it. So they're people that are trying to meet multiple bottom lines. So I think it's a good question for people to ask themselves to figure out if our program's right for you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Next question is for Adam. Adam, what factors does Bankable look at when you consider financing a company?
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you exactly some of the data points that we look at in our loan application. We have a loan scoring model, and as part of that, we'll look at the loan request dollar amount, your total sales, if you have any yet, your annual profit or loss if you've already started. We'll look at that. We'll also look, if you're a brand new startup, then obviously we're not going to look at sales or profit yet. And we're going to look at a lot of your personal financial information, especially since we are focused on those early stage businesses that a lot of times don't have a whole lot of operating history with the business. So we're looking at things like your personal credit score, your personal debt other than mortgage debt, specifically in our scoring model, your outside income. So do you have income from some other source than the business? That always kind of reduces the risk for us. If you have kind of multiple sources of income, that's positive for us. Your net worth, the dollar value of the collateral that you're willing to pledge for the loan, and your number of months in business. And so, you know, there's a lot of different data points that we're looking at there. But one thing I want to make clear is that we don't have a specific number or percentage, or, you know, you have to have this much in profit, or you have to have this credit score or this net worth. It's a lot more flexible than that with our process. So, you know, somebody that might have a low credit score can really make up for that if they have a vehicle or a piece of equipment that we could take as collateral. Or maybe you don't have collateral, but you know, maybe you do all your work on a laptop, and you're a consultant or something, and you don't have physical collateral, but you've got a great credit score, and you're profitable. You know, so we can be a lot more flexible. The other thing I would say that we do as a CDFI and a mission lender is that we are trying to also raise money to come up with loan loss reserve, or the ability to take some extra risk. So, you know, specifically, for example, we've had in 2020 a couple of different banks, Old National and Wells Fargo, provided some funding, some loan loss reserve funding for us to be able to make loans specifically to minority-owned businesses that are members of mid-states. And we're able to, you know, the idea was that, you know, we're supposed to take a little more risk than we might normally do with our scoring model, because they're providing some loan loss reserve. So we're constantly looking for partners that will allow us to take more risk and say yes to more folks. the last thing I'd say is just to provide some context about, how often we're saying yes. So our approval rate is around 40% will be approved. So, we're not saying yes to everybody, certainly, but also, trying to find creative and more flexible ways to be able to say yes as often as we can. So.
Thank you. Next question is for David. David, how does the Indiana Small Business Development Center help companies prepare to meet those criteria that Adam just outlined?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I've known Adam for a couple years now, and we work really, really well with Bankable. So, I think one of the big advantages of working with the SBDC is if you don't have a connection to an organization like Bankable, or you're just not aware of those non-dilutive sources of risk capital, the SBDC is a good place to start. To bring it back almost to one of the things you mentioned, Keith, in your opening, one of the things that we saw for lots of entrepreneurs early last summer was that they didn't have a banking or a lending relationship. And as some of the federal programs were rolling out, people were scrambling to find a bank or a lender. And it kind of goes to Aaron's point about unbanked communities and neighborhoods, and that can be a major, major barrier to any type of growth capital, seed capital, and other capital opportunities. So I think tactically, the SBDC helps in a number of ways, whether it's Adam and Bankable, or if you're in a position to be able to have a conversation with a commercial lender. Every lender is going to want to see a business plan. Every lender is going to want to see certain financial ratios, financial projections, income statement, balance sheet, statement of stockholders' equity. They're going to want to know what they're getting into. Sometimes the people who request market research from the SBDC the most are actually the lenders, right? The lender wants to know that they're making a potential investment in a business that's in a growing industry, or if there's barriers in that industry, that entrepreneur has thought about how to overcome those barriers. And so a lot of that, both educational and technical, that is what the SBDC provides. So we're not only telling you what an income statement looks like, or what your financial ratios are, or your startup costs, or how to calculate those. We actually have templates that we provide and walk through with entrepreneurs to help them figure out what those different pieces of their business are. Think through the amount of capital that they need, which can be a really great conversation to have between the lender, Adam and his team, the SBDC, and the entrepreneur, to understand what amount do you actually need, and what's the payback period, right? Ultimately, what's the payback period? How are your projections going to come to fruition or not, to make sure that the business is able to cover its debt obligations. And so beyond the financial side, I kind of hit on the market research side too. The state provides through the SBDC quite a bit of access to market research databases that someone might not otherwise be able to access themselves. Some of the reports that we commonly provide for our small business clients would cost over $1,000 on the private market if you just went to Google and said, I would like to order a report on this industry. And the one that we use a lot for real estate-based businesses, real estate development, is that GIS system that I mentioned. And that system, allows us to, plant a flag, a peg, a radius around a specific geographic point, and pull all sorts of information about the people, the places, the organizations that operate. So, for example, you could choose an address here in Indianapolis and request information by a 500-foot, 1 mile, 5 mile radius of that single location. You could choose an intersection of two streets and say, how many people walk by that intersection? How many people drive by that intersection every day, every week, every month? What's the income data on the people who live in a 5-mile radius of this point? And for a lot of businesses, that can be really valuable data, right? Even, and I don't know where they pull this data from. It comes from all sorts of federal and government sources and private sources, but even we can get down to data level in terms of the what kinds of restaurants people go to, how many times a week, right? And it's like a really, really valuable information that you can pull from the SBDC. And again, this is part of what the state is trying to do to support small business and entrepreneurs of all types, right? Let's not let knowledge, a lack of knowledge about, financials or financial ratios or a market or an industry opportunity prevent people from getting into entrepreneurship, from growing their small businesses. And so that's really what we're here to do. Keith, I think you're still on mute there.
After a year, you think you would have this done and gone, but no. This next question, Aaron has already partially answered, but for me personally, and how I personally got into this business, I got into this business by accident. It was I got in, so I just happened to be sitting down and I got it. So that's the way I got it. I didn't realize this even existed. I was living in a community where this activity was going on. I had to go to school to figure out that this was occurring in my own community. So the next question that we have is, entrepreneurship is the key to economic growth for local economies. What role does education play in the developing of neighborhoods? And once again, how do African Americans get connected to these opportunities, considering the systematic social and economic gaps that exist?
I'll take a stab and kind of tie it back to the previous question that talked about this. I think looking internally and reflectively at our organization, among many others I know that have been engaged in these conversations, you really have to be intentional. Intentional about what you're doing, intentional about making sure that the message is being communicated in ways that people in underrepresented communities are able to take advantage of the services that are there for them. So I mentioned, the Small Business Development Center, the Indiana Small Business Development Center we're a government service and at no cost to the entrepreneur. But there's a lot of different people across the state who don't know that. They haven't heard of us. They don't know that these resources are there for them. And so, being able to come alongside partners has been really, really impactful for us. Also I mentioned, taking a look internally, understanding, our model operates on employing business advisors and consultants across the state who have kind of been there, done that. They understand entrepreneurship. They've owned businesses before. They're passing on some of their knowledge to the next generation of new entrepreneurs and small business owners. And we had to take a look inside to say, how are we presenting ourselves and our staff and the services that we're offering for people of color? So being intentional about going out and finding Black small business owners who are killing it and are more than willing to provide the knowledge and the insight and the experience that they have gained almost in real time, right? We've got some advisors that we've employed across the state, up in Northwest Indiana, up in South Bend, here in Indianapolis, who are part-time business owner, part-time SBDC advisor. And so, when that entrepreneur comes in and talks to them, it's not, oh, I used to do this, or this is what I did when I was in your shoes. It's like, this is what I was doing today, right? And so I think really being intentional about that level of diversity to be able to understand that there's a limit to what I can do, the impact that I can have versus someone who understands the lived experience. They understand what that walk looks like for different underrepresented communities. And then back to the partnership side, having key partners. Emil and Innopower is a big one. Indiana Black Expo has been a major partner of the SBDC over the last year, really at the start of the pandemic, to make sure that different communities were being able to hear the message about the resources that were out there for all entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so I think it's really about being intentional. And then on the educational piece, somebody mentioned, there's a lot of things you don't go to school for. And I will say entrepreneurship has become more popular, right? Like that's the one of the majors of the moment, if you will. But there's a lot of different things that there aren't degree programs for, right? Like that, and if there are, it's maybe one or two schools, right? There isn't a major in this or a major in that. So understanding that after education, after high school, after potential for college or community college, right? There are organizations out there that have significant educational missions. In Indianapolis, Be Nimble just received Kelly Jones and Be Nimble just received a large grant from Microsoft Corporation to engage in training and education activities. The Indiana SBDC last year, we did 193 trainings and workshops across the state of Indiana. Had well over 3,500 people attend those. Anything from social media 101, business planning 101, knowing your numbers, all the way to QuickBooks. How do I get set up in QuickBooks? How do I get my business listed on Google My Business, right? And we tried to deliver those in webinars and normal situation and in-person workshops, right? Facebook Live, as many ways as we can. But there are a lot of organizations. LISC is obviously involved in doing educational outreach. So is Bankable, and obviously we've learned about some of the ULI programs. So I think there's a lot of organizations out there that provide educational opportunities for entrepreneurs of all backgrounds to be able to take advantage of those outside of any type of formal education, right? And there's plenty of opportunities to learn.
Thank you, David. I know we're getting towards the end, so we're just a few more questions. Aaron, the next question is for you. What organizations in Indiana play the same role as the Indiana Small Business Development Center for real estate?
I think there are probably, there may be a variety of organizations that you could look to that provide, some similar kinds of supports. ULI, certainly would be one of them. In the nonprofit sector, we have informal groups of community development corporations and real estate development entrepreneurs who are working together or connecting and collaborating with each other. So those networks might also provide opportunities as well. Organizations like MyBoard, for example, which is our local real estate development community. Local collaborations and organizations that consist of brokers and other folks in the real estate industry are all for different places that you could look to for resources that have some similarity to those resources.
Okay, thank you, Eric. So last question for everyone. What's your one tip for someone considering starting a business or taking a real estate development opportunity?
I think the theme that we've been on today is learning. Be a sponge and absorb every opportunity that comes your way for learning, and wherever those opportunities are coming from.
I would agree. Do your research, ask lots of questions, take up every opportunity that you can to get information on the market or business that you're trying to break into and address. Figure out what your competitors are doing, variety of things like that. So there's no downside to heavy, excessive amounts of research.
I'd say build your external support team. right? Like you can have none of what we've mentioned here is exclusive, right? You can work with the SBDC and LISC and ULI and Bankable and a whole host of other organizations who are out there to support entrepreneurs and small business, right? The thing that I love the most in my role is when I see an entrepreneur or a small business who takes advantage of the entire ecosystem of resources. Sometimes as folks who are engaged in trying to build that ecosystem, it can oftentimes feel like people may think it feels like a maze or they don't know who to go to. And we try to connect those dots. And when you see somebody who's able to, they work with Bankable and they get a loan, and they work with LISC and they get connected to a CDFI opportunity. They work with these organizations all across the ecosystem. That's really rewarding and impactful and illustrative of the fact that there are resources out there, and don't hesitate to reach out and build that external support team and lean on those people to support you and your business.
And I'll just kind of wrap it up. The advice I usually like to give is just to start, just start something. I've been a entrepreneur on the side for all these 10 years that I've been at Bankable, and I've started a few different businesses that have failed and one that's doing okay. But that's where I've learned the most is screwing up, and don't risk it all. I don't want you to risk it all on the first try, but just start trying to start something. Try to sell your product or service. That's where you're going to learn more than any research you can probably end up doing. At least that's been true for me and for a lot of other many of our clients. So that'd be my encouragement.
Well, thank you. I'm going to get ready to close this up, but the one thing that I heard that was consistent among all of you is you have to network and build relationships. Externally, internally. If you don't have a banking relationship, you need to build those types of relationships. That's one of the key points to trying to get some of this work done. And I would like to thank all of our panelists for today. You've been amazing, informative, and I'm appreciative that you allowed me to moderate with you today. And I would like to thank everyone for joining our conversation today. I hope that it offered a helpful overview of the landscape of opportunity for you and your organizations. Next month, we will examine in depth the partners who can advise and consult your new or expanding business or real estate venture, and who can help you build capacity in various operational areas. In future months, we will look at the financing landscape and how to land an investment. We look forward to seeing you at the next First Friday conversation on economic competitiveness. Have a great weekend, and thank you.